By the way, if you're looking to earn yourself this new and exclusive emblem, you can do so by gifting a sub to my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/LlamaD2 during the Guardian Games event. Right, hello guys, welcome back. One of the best things about Destiny 2 is the sheer build variety on offer, and on this channel I've created countless builds that promote fun and unique playstyles which you can reliably take into most forms of content, from the lowest level easy stuff like seasonal activities to more difficult challenges like Grandmaster Nightfalls. However, while all of these builds are strong in their own right, sometimes you just want to know what the absolute best build in the game is for any given situation, because there's nothing wrong with doing everything as efficiently as possible. So today I'm going to take you through what I believe are the single best builds for each and every class updated for episode Heresy, and discuss why they are so strong in the first place, along with a couple honorable mentions, since specifically for Warlocks and Hunters the answer isn't as clear cut as Titan. And speaking of, let's begin with the strongest Titan build in the game by a landslide, the Prismatic Consecration Spam build. Despite a whopping 55% nerf to both the Scorch and Slam Wave damage in episode Heresy, the Consecration Titan build continues to dominate. So here's how you should build yours for maximum damage potential. But quickly before we start, I do want to mention that today's builds won't rely too heavily on the artifact. For one, because there actually aren't that many mods that make a huge difference to these builds this season anyway, but also they are strong enough on their own, hence best build in the game. And they often don't need any input from the artifact at all. That said though, I will still be providing some artifact recommendations for each of them. Okay then, at the heart of every Consecration Titan build is either the Syntheseps exotic gauntlets or an exotic class item with Spirit of Syntheseps plus another useful perk. And typically most people opt for Spirit of Inmost Light for the second slot, but another good option is Spirit of the Assassin, so that your Consecration kills also make you invisible. So it is quite flexible, but if I had to choose one, I'd always go down the class item route with Spirit of Inmost Light as the second perk. Regular Syntheseps or Spirit of Syntheseps increase your melee damage by 165% or 2.65 times when surrounded by 3 or more enemies. And this buff also affects the ignition damage caused by Consecration, since if you didn't know, the Scorch you apply directly inherits the properties of what specific ability it comes from. And since Consecration is a melee ability, the Scorch applied technically counts as melee damage and thus gets buffed by Syntheseps as well, something which wasn't affected by the Heresy nerfs and is actually the main draw of the ability in the first place. Another thing that makes this ability so strong is that the ignitions you cause can splash to nearby targets. So if, for example, there are 2 enemies that are close to each other and you ignite them both, each enemy will take the damage of 2 separate ignitions, effectively doubling the value of your Consecration. Alright then, now let's get stuck in by discussing our subclass configuration, starting with our super of choice, which is going to be Thunder Crash. This super is currently one of the best raw damage dealers in the game, bar only a few outlier roaming supers, and is applicable to most bosses and situations in the game. There are times where another super like Twilight Arsenal might be better for things like killing tormentors, but overall Thunder Crash is a very good pick. However, in the gameplay you're seeing, I was using Glacial Quake instead, since it was more fit for the activity, which in this case was a solo GM. When playing Prismatic Titan in PvE, you should always run Thruster for your class ability because of the low cooldown, and especially because it helps to cycle your other abilities faster when using Spirit of Inmost Light. And aside from its niche movement benefits, you can really think of it as a I want my grenade and melee to regen faster now button, since that's all it's really used for. For the melee ability, we're of course taking Frenzied Blade, since it gives you 3 charges by default, letting you perform 3 consecrations back to back to back. And the grenade is kind of personal preference, but make sure it's either the Shackle Grenade or the Glacier Grenade. We don't need a light grenade since all of our light damage comes from Consecration, and me personally, I prefer the Shackle Grenade. For the aspects, of course, you need Consecration, and for the second, we are taking Knockout. This is a no-brainer, since now for getting kills with Consecration, we are also becoming amplified and restoring a small portion of health and start health regeneration. Knockout also increases the damage of all powered melee attacks, including Consecration, by 50% while the buff is active. And let's not forget that being amplified now provides you with a free 15% damage resist and makes it so enemies are less accurate when targeting you, letting you play even more aggressive than you could before. As far as the fragments are concerned, we are essentially abusing the 5 strongest ones available for maximum results, starting with Facet of Courage, which states that your Arc, Solar, and Void abilities deal increased damage to targets affected by darkness debuffs, which turns out to be a 10% increase that's mainly used to buff the damage of your Thunder Crash by either throwing your Darkness Grenade or shooting a shot from Tenacious Mastery, but more on that in the weapons section. With this fragment, the Limit Break artifact perk, and Curus of the Falling Star, your Thunder Crash deals 1.2 million damage, which is honestly pretty bonkers. Next, we're taking Facet of Balance. This fragment states that rapidly defeating targets with light damage grants melee energy, and rapidly defeating targets with dark damage grants grenade energy. And since our our main form of add clear is a light damage melee ability. Getting kills with consecration literally refuels itself via this fragment. Next is Facet of Protection, which is simply going to provide a free 15% damage resistance when surrounded by 3 or more enemies that also jumps to 32% when surrounded and transcendent. For our fourth fragment, we have Facet of Purpose. This is going to make it so collecting an Orb of Power grants either Bolt Charge, Restoration, Frost Armor, Woven Mail, or Void Overshield for 5 seconds based on the damage type of your super. And because we have Thunder Crash, an Arc super, we now gain 1 stack of Bolt Charge from each orb collected, which is another reason why you could argue that Consecration Titan got buffed instead of nerfed, since it can also dip into the Bolt Charge toolkit now, and we all know how strong Bolt Charge is this season. Finally, your last fragment should be Facet of Dawn. This is going to make it so powered melee hits make you radiant for 4 seconds, and with how often you're using Consecration, this fragment is going to be proccing very often. And as a reminder, Radiant is now a 20% damage buff to your weapons. Quickly skimming over the weapons now, because your abilities carry your add clear super hard, you can actually afford and are encouraged to run double special alongside this build. And the 2 weapons I'd recommend are Tinashe's Mastery with Chill Clip and Choir of One with the Destabilizing Rounds refit. The reason we want both of these weapons is because they are both excellent at rapidly generating Transcendence energy for their respective element, especially in the case of Tinashe's and Dark Energy. Just look at how fast it charges. The whole idea of this build is using your weapons and abilities to get your Transcendence meter charged as fast as humanly possible, which is something that this double special setup right here is excellent at doing. If you don't have a good Tinashe's, then Lost Signal is also a great pick, or even the Call can do you just fine. Artifact wise, you should be speccing into the Void mods like Volatile Marksman and Maligned Harvest, but the 2 that are most important are Flashover and Limit Break. Flashover will make you amplified once you gain maximum bolt charge and increase the damage of your lightning bolts by 2.5 times, and Limit Break increases the damage of your Thunder Crash by 30% as long as you are red health, amplified, or are holding bolt charge when you cast it, leading to the absurd number I showed you before. For your stats, I would recommend getting triple 100 in Resilience, Discipline, and Strength if you can, but if not, then prioritize Resilience first, then Strength, then Discipline. The mods I use are up on screen, and some notable ones are Hands-On for some bonus super energy on melee kills, Triple Heavy-Handed so that every Consecration kill makes an orb, and Appropriate Scavengers for your special weapons. As I mentioned already, this build is all about generating your Transcendence fast and spamming it over and over, and it's also a very aggressive playstyle, but despite that, it's also generally pretty safe, since for one, your melees deal so much damage you're likely to wipe out an add wave in a single slam, and second, you heal any lost health by doing so and gain a crap load of damage resistance too, which is why this build is the best in the game for Titans. Moving on to the Warlock now, the build I have selected as the best in the game currently is the Prismatic Lightning Surge spam build, which is almost a mirror of the previous Titan build but with the Warlock abilities instead. Much like the Titan, this build involves spamming the Lightning Surge slide melee again alongside a Spirit of Syntheseps class item. In episode Heresy, Lightning Surge received a few changes that to some degree put it on par with Consecration. For starters, it received a 30% damage buff versus PvE combatants, and second, each enemy hit by Lightning Surge now grants you a stack of Bolt Charge in return. So again, much like the Titan, this build became even better this season because of its newfound access to Bolt Charge. Just for fun, I decided to compare the damage of Lightning Surge with Synthos to Consecration with Synthos, and as expected, Consecration is still way ahead, but Lightning Surge is still putting out an impressive number. The point is that you can treat these playstyles very similarly since they are very similar. Both revolve around spamming a slide melee ability that deals a ton of AoE damage, which also means the subclass makeup will be mostly the same for the Warlock too, so let's get into it. For the super of choice, I would strongly recommend taking Song of Flame, as it's probably the best roaming super in the game purely because you retain the ability to shoot your weapons while in it, and add on the fact that it provides a 90% damage resist while active, making you basically unkillable. You could swap this out for Nova Bomb if you really wanted, but in my opinion, Song of Flame is always the stronger pick for most things unless of course you're doing a boss encounter. For the class ability, we're taking Phoenix Dive because it has the lowest cooldown, thus making it a good option for bolstering the regen rate of your other 2 abilities when using Spirit of Inmost Light. For your melee ability, you must choose Arcane Needle, since again, exactly like Frenzied Blade, it too has 3 charges by default, letting you perform Lightning Surge 3 times in a row. And then finally for the grenade, we have the Cold Snap Grenade to provide a good source of dark energy. Aspects wise, we of course want Lightning Surge, and fun fact, even though Bungie said they were removing it, Lightning Surge still grants you amplified on cast, so just something to keep in mind. And then for the second aspect, we're taking the one and only Feed the Void. Feed the Void is going to make it so any ability kill grants Enhanced Devour for 10 seconds, and you guys already know how good this is. It's Devour, you full heal on kill and get a sizable chunk of grenade energy back too, so what's not to love? As far as the fragments are concerned, we basically want the exact same ones as the Titan build with one small change. Instead of Facet of Balance, we're taking Facet of Dominance instead. This fragment makes it so your Void Grenades weaken targets, and even though we don't have a Void Grenade, this fragment makes it so the Void component of the Freezing Singularity Prismatic Grenade also applies Weaken, and in this case the overall value this provides is more beneficial than that of Facet of Balance, hence why we replaced it. Also, because we have Song of Flame, a solar super, Facet of Purpose now gives us Restoration ×1 when collecting an Orb of Power. Weapons wise, we can again take advantage of double special since our abilities carry our ad clear so hard, and this time I recommend you take Tenacious Mastery with Chokeclip and Lord of Wolves. I'm sure by now most of you know how good Lord of Wolves is for just about everything. It shreds through any high health target in your way, and as a result is able to rapidly build your light meter to full in a matter of seconds. And do try to get the Catalyst as well, since this gives it inherent scorching rounds when fired from the hip. As far as the artifact is concerned, I would recommend taking Dielectric in column 3. This mod makes it so defeating arc debuff targets grants Bolt Charge, and because Lightning Surge applies Jolt, this mod should be activating almost all the time, making it a great way of generating even more Bolt Charge. Then finish up with Flashover, Defibrillating Blast, and Limit Break like before. Stats wise, your goal should be to get as close as you can to triple 100 on Resilience, Discipline, and Strength, because with Devour you won't have to worry about recovery at all. While we're on the topic of Devour, there is an alternative class item role you can try for this build, which is the combo of Spirit of Syntheseps and Spirit of Filaments. Spirit of Filaments will make it so casting your Empowering Rift grants Devour, but also, in episode Heresy, both Secant Filaments and Spirit of Filaments were changed so that kills while Devour is active also grant a small amount of class ability energy, which now means you can swap Feed the Void for something else like Helion or Bleakwatcher while also retaining Devour. Yeah, it's not the full enhanced Devour, but it does allow you to be a little more careful by, for example, placing a stasis turret in the middle of a room before you start sliding in and causing chaos to make it just a little safer for you. Here are the mods I use for the build, so feel free to take a screenshot or pause the video to copy them. Regardless of which class item variation you go for, both of them can be considered the very best of the Warlock class. However, I do hear some of you having differing opinions on this and would perhaps suggest other builds like the tried and true Getaway Artist Arcan Stasis Buddy build, which is still incredibly strong even though the artifact basically does nothing for it this season. But to that, I want to mention a few things. The first being that while yes, the Getaway Artist build is still very good, it's also incredibly brain off, I suppose you could say. It's a rather safe playstyle and doesn't encourage risky plays for higher rewards, and I personally think the Lightning Surge build is a lot more fun. That said though, the Getaway build will still carry you through most things, so I've left a dim link to it in the description as well. Finally, we're finishing up with the Hunter, and the build I believe is the best in the game is the Prismatic Gifted Conviction Ascension build. The core of this build revolves around the Gifted Conviction exotic chest piece, which does a few things for us. For starters, it causes your Ascension ability to release a cluster of additional explosives that deal damage and apply Jolt to any targets hit, and second, applying Jolt to nearby targets grants you an escalating amount of damage resistance all the way up to 4 stacks of resist, which results in a 50% overall damage negation. I'm sure you all know by this point how strong Ascension is, especially when combined with Gifted Conviction, but this season it has actually become even stronger because of a small change that got made to it. Now, activating Ascension will trigger the effects of your equipped class ability, and if you pair this with Gambler's Dodge, using your Ascension near an enemy will fully refund your melee ability, effectively giving you double the uptime on your melee. So the whole gist of this build is taking this change, pairing it with a strong melee ability, and building the rest of your kit into making sure both have maximum uptime. So let's begin breaking it down. For our super of choice, we have Marksman Golden Gun. 1, because it's a roaming super, and with the recent changes made in Revenant, it's able to charge really fast as long as you're dealing constant damage, and 2, it's one of only 2 supers on Prismatic Hunter which has a unique interaction with Ascension, the other being Silk Strike. The interaction in question is that when you pop your super, you are then able to spam your Ascension as many times as you'd like, at least until the super ends. You don't even need to have your dodge fully charged. As long as you're in super, you can keep on using it, and when paired with Gifted Conviction, this tech makes it super easy to reach that maximum resist cap and in general just decimate an entire room. For the class ability, we're taking Gambler's Dodge for reasons we discussed a moment ago, and then for the melee, we're taking Threaded Spike. This ability is excellent for clearing big groups of trash ads or severing a group of beefier ones so that they deal less damage to you. Finally, I've also gone for the Grapple Grenade here, but you could also swap this for any other grenade of your choice. It doesn't have to be grapple, I just quite like it. The second aspect which we are pairing with Ascension is Stylish Executioner. This aspect is simply going to make you invisible after defeating any enemy affected by an elemental debuff. The main reason we want this is to add to our overall survivability, and since all of our kit revolves around applying elemental debuffs of of some kind like Sever from Threaded Spike, Unravel from Grapple, Jolt from Ascension, we will become invisible very frequently. As for the fragments, we're taking Facet of Dawn so that our Threaded Spike can make us radiant on hits, Facet of Blessing so that Threaded Spike kills start health regeneration, Facet of Purpose so that collecting an Orb of Power grants restoration ×1, Facet of Protection for the free 15% or 32% DR when surrounded and or transcendent, and finally Facet of Hope so that our class ability, aka Ascension, recharges 60% faster whenever we're holding at least 2 elemental buffs. Weapons wise, I've gone for the Multi-Mac roll from Banshee since it's really solid for generating lots of orbs, and then the brand new Lotus Eater Void Rocket Assisted Frame Sidearm with Repulsor Brace destabilizing rounds. Artifact wise, Dielectric is yet again a great pick so that the build can dip into Bolt Charge, and then to improve said Bolt Charge, taking Flashover and Defibrillating Blast will seal the deal. Stats wise, it's important that you get 50 mobility so that when you become amplified, the inherent 50 you get from it will add on to your base 50, putting you at 100 overall. Then make sure you have 100 in both Resilience and Discipline, and pour the rest into Recovery. Again, the mods are up on screen if you want to pause and take notes. With the amount of damage resistance and enemy debuffing, this build is an excellent choice for any level of content. But I also wanted to suggest some alternatives since, like I said, the answer for the best build isn't as clear-cut for hunters. Another great option is running an exotic class item with Spirit of Inmost Light and Spirit of Certarachne alongside Gunpowder Gamble so that each time you throw your regular grenade or Gunpowder Gamble, you're granted Woven Mail for 10 seconds, which by the way is a 45% damage resist. And then the Inmost Light lets you spam the rest of your abilities a lot more often. And furthermore, you could also run Gifted Conviction on the Pure Arc subclass because there you can pair Ascension with the Flow State aspect so that it recharges unbelievably fast. But overall, I do think the Prismatic variation has more merit. So there we have it. Those are my picks for the best build in the game for every single class. The fashion for each of them will be cycling through your screen now, and as always, I will leave dim links to all the builds in the description. Before I go, a reminder that I'm live on Twitch right now doing more solo witness attempts, so do come say hi. Anyway, that's all for today. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now, dear viewer.